Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Fullback Dive, brought to you by the good people at the Roto Street Journal, acting as your lead blocker to fantasy glory, paving your way to fantasy excellence, making all your football-related fantasies come true. I'm your host, Nat the Truth Jones. It's a recurring theme now. We're coming at you middle of the day. We're sharp. The day hasn't broken us yet. It's like noon or 12:30 or something like that. School's over. And the Wolf of Roto Street, who is my, co-host as always on these particular projection shows, he's done too. Wolf, how you doing?
Hey, that great sense of freedom, truth, nothing. Back to the coffee shop at 7 a.m., bang out some projections, come and share them live with you guys. What's better than that? I love teaching. It's a great gig. Don't get me wrong, but this is also what I just love to do in my free time. So it's nice to have all that free time, and it's great to be able to jump in at lunchtime and spend it with you guys. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so we're returning to the series that we did last year, maybe even the year before. I don't remember. We've done this for a long time. There have been plenty of times we've run out of time and haven't finished all the teams before.
Yeah.
But generally, I think we're on top of this one. We might actually finish this year. We're going to try to hit every division and hit every team. So obviously 4 teams in a division. So we're going to try to do 8 of these shows. And the feedback we've gotten from these things in the past has been pretty much universally positive. So, because you guys have said you've enjoyed them, that's why we're enthusiastic to bring them back to you. And we're starting with a good one this week. We're going to the AFC East. Little bit going on there, right? You excited?
Oh, yeah. But I feel like it's quickly become like a laughing stock division to one of the most competitive and interesting divisions in all of football over the last full year. So, yeah, I'm very excited to break them down. And as you said, go through every division. We'll be live at mostly 12:30 from here on out. Friday will be different this week. And then next week, 12:30 again at lunchtime, just to get you guys Monday through Thursday, all these projections. So come on down. They will be available on the site. This is one of the few things we do put up as a premium, behind a paywall type of thing. So if you want to support your boys, come check it out in July. They'll be all up. We update them for, throughout the summer. This is just my first draft before training camp starts, before a bunch of news hits. This is where I'm expecting the players to be. Now, all this will get shaken up, of course, but for now, these are my projections on all the relevant players, division by division, as you said, starting with the AFC East. I'm pumped.
And when we start with the AFC East, and obviously these, before we start, so let me ask you this before we get into the first team. Do we give where are they going to finish in the division predictions at the end of the show or at the beginning of the show?
We can do that at the end. Yeah, we'll do that at the end. Well, how do we see it shaking out, whatnot? We'll dive in all the fantasy goodness for you. And then you football fans that want to talk about records and that type of stuff, we can get that afterwards for sure.
All right. I mean, I feel like the two of us should predict on every division.
Why not? Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Keep score, of course.
Perfect. Well, as we pull these in, if you don't mind and you're enjoying what you hear, that thumbs up button would be so greatly appreciated as you're listening. If you like what you're hearing, it does help us get out to more people. So come on in, get all your questions answered. You let us know if you hate any of our projections, disagree with anything, any that you feel are bold but you agree with. And, of course, any questions, whether it's related to these projections, rookie drafts, whatever, your boy will answer them at the end. So get those on in. Thanks again for being here, spending your lunchtime talking about some projections. Let's dive in.
Yeah, any AFC East projection series, of course, you want to probably start. Conveniently, they're also first alphabetically, but, let's admit it. They're the team we want to talk about first. Anyway, that's the Bills. We're going to talk about their 2023 fantasy projections. Just so you guys know, I'm going to put these banners up, and I'm not leaving them. So, I'm just going to leave it 10 seconds or so. If you're scrolling through the video, you can see what we're about to do. But we got some pretty cool numbers on the board behind us, and I don't want to obstruct your view. So I'm taking that down now. Let's talk Buffalo, Wolf.
Yeah, let's chat them. And as you'll see when we go through these teams, we love to start with it's a great tool, RotoViz. They have a projection machine. I use it every year. And you start at that market level, the team level. What do you expect in terms of total plays, pass plays versus run plays? And then you kind of distribute the shares from there. So I came up with 641 pass attempts versus 448 rush attempts. That would give them 1089 plays, which would be just above league average, 41 plays above league average. If you look last year under Ken Dorsey, they go from 680, 631 pass attempts to just 591. Oh, man, he took the reins off. Different style of offense after Brian Daboll has left. They were minus 27 plays under the league average. But that, I think, was a big result of Josh Allen's injury. Remember, week 8, we've talked about this on the quarterback rankings, even on the receiver rankings, looking at Diggs, and we'll reiterate a lot of those points here. But they were chucking it at a faster pace more often than ever. from weeks 1 through 8. So I don't think that was an issue, a Ken Dorsey taking the reins. I thought he did a great job. And if you look at weeks 1 through 8, when they were fully healthy, they were pushing it farther down the field and faster pace more than ever. So I think right around that 641 range in terms of pass attempts, a nice big aerial pie with some rushing attempts, a lot of those going to Josh Allen also mixed in there. So that's the overall picture of what I'm seeing for the Bills. Now, how is this all going to shake out, in my opinion? So those 628-ish pass attempts, those 640 total, what if somebody has to come in for a play or two? We always just put 2% for the QB2. But ideally, you're getting all those to Josh Allen. And let's talk about how we think that'll shake out. He's different, and we're going to kind of have to go through this one a little bit differently just because Josh Allen is such a different beast. You can't really separate the run and pass games and break them down separately because he's such a big part of both of them. So you look at him, and I think he's going to take in, just as he always had, about 25% of the rushes, 112. That would be right in line with everything he's ever done. In fact, that would be fewer. He's had 124, 122, 113, and 118 rush attempts these last 4 years. So this would be the lowest yet. They're classic. We want Josh Allen to run less. They're saying that a lot throughout this offseason. They signed Damien Harris, so maybe they lessen it a little bit. But at crunch time, especially at the stripe in big games, I do think Josh Allen will be getting right along with his career averages there. So I have him going for about 600 rush yards, as you can see. We move over here to the rushing totals. I'll try to kind of zoom in so you guys can see these things clear. I have him going for 112 carries, 661 yards, and 6 touchdowns, which is actually a little step back, accounting for the fact that they might take a little bit of rushing work off his plate. So that's where I see him fitting into the run game. And that does mean the scraps are not nearly as healthy for the Bills backs, despite being such an explosive offense. When your quarterback's taking 25% or so of the rushing pie, that's nothing to sneeze at. Especially now with Damien Harris here too. This becomes a much muddier committee in my situation. I think he's an upgrade to Devin Singletary. So yes, James Cook getting a lot of hype. I like the kid. But between Josh Allen and then Damien Harris stealing touchdowns, 4 touchdowns honestly might even be an exaggeration. He's going to have to be scoring out from far. And he's a big play threat. He could be scoring out from far. But 4 touchdowns, maybe 6 total if you add a couple receiving, that seems about right for James Cook on 150 carries. A lot of talk about him being the lead guy, looking great in camp. But I still think Damien Harris, they didn't sign him just to have him rot on the bench, and especially towards the stripe. So I see these guys in a near even committee, with then Damien Harris coming out with a little bit more value for the rushing game. But Josh Allen, again, also such a big threat. So that's why neither of those guys, James Cook, Damien Harris, neither of those guys are inside my top, must draft right of the first 8 rounds. Rounds 9 through 11, if Harris is lingering in round 11, 12, I've taken some stabs on him there, but I don't have much of James Cook at all. I do have a ton of Josh Allen, though. We'll talk about the passing game in a sec, but any of those metrics in the run game seem way off to you, Truth, or how we rolling so far?
No, I mean, I always have kind of my knee-jerk impression of any sort of scene, and, my knee-jerk impression of Buffalo is all explosive offense. Man, I want pieces of that offense no matter what. And, then you look at the running game, like you said, and it's I can't help but feel extremely underwhelmed. You're looking at, and I agree with your assessment of Allen. I think Allen might pull back a little on the running game. Maybe you're a tiny bit high, but not much at all. I mean, minimum he's going to rush 100 times. You got him at 112. I mean, you don't have either running back. I'm looking at attempts. I mean, you don't have either running back averaging 10 carries a game. I mean, you got one guy at 7 or 8, one guy at 9. Yeah, I don't love that. So that's interesting. My instinct without having done the research would have been ooh, I like Cook. I like Harris. I don't really, though.
Yeah. It just ends up being the case when you have these Konami quarterbacks and then a split backfield behind them, most likely. It becomes really tough to get value. But we did talk about this giant aerial pie. And
I love the aerial pie. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah. And I think we're going to get one of the best, if not the best we've ever seen. So Josh Allen before the injury, we keep going before versus after. He was on pace for 5,338 passing yards in weeks 1 through 8. They were airing it out like crazy. 37 attempts per game, on pace for 641, and they were airing it deep very, very early and very, very often. So I don't know that he necessarily hits that. That would have been the 3rd most yards of all time had he hit 5,338. But 314 yards per game, I mean, he could maybe hit that again this year and come close to that. So I do have him projected, if you scroll up here, right, to break that 5,000-yard barrier for the first time in his career, as well as crossing from he's always been around the 38 to 39 touchdown range these last couple of years. I think he breaks in and hits up to 40 this year. So we got a nice, healthy aerial pie, and I think it's going to be distributed as follows. 27% of that share going to Stefon Diggs. And this tool, again, I keep highlighting this tool with RotoViz, the projection machine, but it's what I love about it. So let's say I want to go to wide receiver 1 and see how the production has been shaking out. You can kind of zoom in and see Diggs ever since he arrived here, 28, 26, and 29% target share. You can see his receiving yards, 1,400, 1,200, 1,600. So you can see all these different stats and how he's performed well being here with the Bills. 177, 163, 152 targets. So I think we're right in line, 173 here, 27%, with what we've typically seen from Stefon Diggs. I think he turns that into 119 catches. He's averaged right around 65 to 72, somewhere in that range, percent catch rate. So he catches around 120 balls for 1,618 yards and 9 touchdowns. Now, keep in mind, too, before Josh Allen got hurt, we keep coming back to that, but Stefon Diggs was on pace for 1,855 yards and 17 touchdowns. He was going absolutely bananas in those first 7 weeks prior to the injury for Josh Allen. So this 1,609 is a lot, but it also might not even capture the true ceiling of Stefon Diggs. It's truly just what I expect from him. So I think that's just more of the same quality first rounder. The other big guy, so behind him, it does get a lot shakier. You know you're going to get 25 to 30% of the targets going there. So how is the rest distributed? So I had Gabe Davis seeing 17% share. That's what he got last year. Now, a lot of people are just probably tuning out now. I don't want any of Daddy Davis after what he did to us last year. And if that's your case, honestly, I couldn't really blame you. But I think he got that week 1 ankle injury and just wasn't really himself till towards the end of the year, right? In the playoffs, hit 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. You saw the Gabe Davis you thought you might see throughout 2022. So I don't necessarily say we're going to get that all year, but I'm not going to say he's going to go a huge step backwards either. When they added nobody, they talked about their faith in him now that he's fully healthy. I think right along with those 100-ish targets he saw last year, he's right around a 50% catch rate last year. So 976 and 8. The difference between Gabe Davis this year and last year is 1, the health, but also 2, you don't have to pay a 3rd, 4th rounder to find out. He's going around 7, 8, 9 even sometimes right now. You're buying him at his floor. He finishes the wide receiver 35, and you're drafting him as the wide receiver 40 right now, when I think the ceiling is still there. Even if he matches what he did last year, you're getting him at that right cost. And I do think there's a ceiling now that he's healthy for him to definitely shake things out. Would you ever go to Daddy Davis? Or are you part of the crew that just hit tune out till I was done with Gabe Davis?
No, this was going to be kind of one of my hot takes coming in. Is like I'm ready. I'm ready to get back in the Daddy Davis business.
Nice. Back in for Daddy. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I hadn't heard your specific argument for it, but my thought was just like his price. I mean, we loved this. Remember how much we loved him and Allen Robinson? Oh my God.
2 of our worst predictions of all time.
I know. And we were both we were both really confident on both of those guys. And with Davis, it's like I look at him and it's like, yeah, he was disappointing. Being a Davis owner last year was really frustrating. I genuinely still believe the big dick talent is there. And I don't think he's going to be worse. And I think there's a chance he's going to be way better. And you can get him kind of cheap, right?
Yeah, like we're saying, rounds 8, 9 sometimes right now. It's definitely the right spot. About 7 on underdog in these early drafts that really he goes late, but even still, that's not bad. Like in that pick 75 to 80 range is where you typically find in him. And I think, as you said, that's at his floor. That's what he did last year. Obviously, you want more. The fact that he was only a wide receiver 1 in 2 games of all last year. He was a top 24 receiver in just 33% of the games. Otherwise, it was a lot of duds, 5.5, 5. He's not the type that even in his duds is at least getting you something serviceable. It was very boom or bust, but I do think this was the least healthy we've seen Gabe Davis. We've seen him perform much better clips. I definitely think there's certainly at his price, I'm willing to buy it back. Behind him, unless Khalil, there's Trent Sherfield's getting praised in early OTAs. Khalil Shakir has apparently stepped up. We've seen it before with like Isaiah McKenzie. There's always going to be this third guy in this explosive attack, and it typically just doesn't end up panning out because they cannibalize each other. But if you tell me Khalil Shakir or Trent Sherfield, one of the 2 separates completely, I might be intrigued. If you combine their numbers, 489 and 4, 386 and 3, that would be a nice, useful wide receiver 3 if somebody in here truly took the every down role. But what we've seen in the past is it's about a shared role, and 50% of the routes go to one guy, 60% go to the other. It becomes a mess. And that especially gets even more messy when they added Dalton Kincaid, the quote-unquote tight end 2 on paper here. I think he's definitely the tight end 1 in terms of volume and performance, though. When all is said and done, I love this player. Maybe it takes a year. Sometimes we do see rookies translate slower, but they're already raving about him in the slot as this big body, that more of a receiver than a tight end. That's how he was addressed in college coming out, and that's how he's been translating so far in camp. So I see a big role for Dalton Kincaid. 8 touchdowns, I don't think is completely unreasonable for a 6'5" guy in one of the most explosive offenses. He will be nibbling the cheese with Dawson Knox throughout the year. As you can see, 14 combined touchdowns for him. But this is just kind of right in line. I bumped just last year, they targeted tight ends around 16 total percent, with Knox seeing about 12%. I just bumped that to about 20% this year, with 11% going to Kincaid, 9 going to Dawson Knox. And yeah, a committee situation does make it a little trickier to trust each week. But if somebody was just going to take over and emerge as that no-brainer number 1 tight end here, it would be Kincaid. So I projected him a little bit higher. It's going to be a tricky situation, though, if they both stay healthy and they're constantly nibbling each other's cheese.
All right, fair enough. We went a little over our projected 10 minutes, but it's the Bills, so it's to be excused.
It's the most intriguing one. That's not what time did we clock in at for that?
We went about 13 minutes on that.
Oh, okay. That's. I was like, you were about to tell me 20. I was like, oh shit,
no,
long?
It wasn't egregious. It was good analysis. I like that. There's a lot to think about there. Campanelli, by the way, showed up in the comments. He says, everybody stay away from Davis. Truth just mushed him for the year.
Campanelli doesn't forget the mush of the year.
I mean, some of those mushes were intentional, though. Like,
yes.
that became a running bit after a while.
Right.
All right. Let's talk Dolphins. Perhaps not coincidentally, I'd say probably the second most interesting team to talk about here. A lot of this stuff we've gone over on our quarterback show, on our wide receiver show that we did together, tight end, stuff like that. So some of this is going to be stuff you've heard us say before. But this is now in the context of the entire team working in the running game and all that stuff. Give me the breakdown on the Dolphins.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, I'll reference a lot of that news and notes that feed into these projections, but it is good still to have your thoughts on what you think you're going to do. And then when you actually go and look at a ton of research, I was just at the coffee shop for 3 hours doing one division. I really do look at all the big pies and then laser it into trends and what has the coach done in the past with similar players. So it does take a while, but this is really just confirming a lot of what we do. So in terms of the team level, as you can see there, for the Dolphins, I was surprised at how few plays they actually end up running. You think they're fast-paced and they're just constantly pushing, and they were in terms of the amount of how quickly they ran, but they just didn't run that many plays because they scored so frequently and such big plays as well. So ultimately, they ran the 27th total plays last year, but finished 11th in scoring, which just tells you how high-powered and how fast they scored. It didn't take often. They would have quick drives and pound them off real quick with big play after big play. And a lot of those were short plays that turned into big plays because of how greatly designed this offense is under McDaniel. So last year was 602 pass attempts, 406 rush attempts. I projected something somewhat similar. I could see an uptick in some total plays here just because year 2 of the system, you hear all the players already raving about how, Tyreek Hill calling it night and day with how well he thinks he's going to produce. Well, he just put up, 1,700 yards and 119 catches. So if it's night and day for him, look out. Same with Jaylen Waddle saying, coming in and not having to learn all the verbiage, but now we're just enhancing everything. McDaniels himself saying the way the faster too is processing things. So to me, I wouldn't be shocked at all if we get about 50, 60 total more plays from this offense. And for this offense, 50 to 60 total more plays is actually a really, really big deal considering how quickly they score so often. So that's my overall team level. I still think it'll be about 60% pass, 40% run, even if they do make a move and get Dalvin Cook. So that's one of the things that could shake this up. I don't think the overall output of this offense would change. I still think it's a very pass happy. Let's get the playmakers the ball quick and let's see what happens. So that's kind of the team level I expect. In terms of how I expect that pretty decent healthy pie of Ariel, get passed around. This is an easy one. That's why we could probably spend less time on them. It's Tyreek Hill, it's Jaylen Waddle, and there really is not much else behind them. Last year, Tyreek Hill saw 32%. I have him for 30% right now, 183 targets, 126 catches. I mean, this guy is so ridiculous, Tyreek Hill, that he ultimately averaged over 14 yards per reception, yet still caught over 70% of his balls. Like that's just insane efficiency from Tyreek Hill. So I have him right in line with what he did last year, a little bit of a bump up, given that he's playing faster in this offense, more touchdowowns. He only scored 7 last year. I could definitely see him hitting 11, even 15 or so. He did set a goal for 2,000 receiving yards, and that could be that. I mean, if anyone's going to do it, it's somebody like Tyreek Hill that can really rip 90 yards in the blink of an eye. Wouldn't shock me at all how well designed he is in this offense, but I have him right now for 1751 and 11 touchdowns on 126 catches. Either way, that's going to be an alpha worth your top 5 overall pick type of season. 24% going to Waddle. This would be a pretty big jump in targets. Last year, and I like to kind of scroll down and show you guys this. So this is one thing I found insane about Jaylen Waddle's production. So he goes, I'll zoom out a little bit so we can see this a little clearer. He goes as a rookie, 140 targets, paced the team, 104 catches, looking great. Only 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns on that, 9.78 yards per reception, which seemed weird. Waddle's a speedster. Why is he kind of playing this Jarvis Landry dink and dunk role? Strange. Well, his yards per reception doubled nearly, 18 yards per reception last year. So even on 30 fewer targets, 116 on 30 fewer catches, 75 versus 104, he ends up having over 300 yards, adding 2 more touchdowns, outscoring his fantasy points big time. I could now see maybe a perfect, and this is where the ceiling would be, a perfect meeting in the middle where we get that like 140-ish targets, but he maintains pretty close to that efficiency this year. And that's kind of what I've statted it out at, not like, the perfect meeting of the worlds, but keeping, 15 yards per catch instead of 18, catching 96 balls instead of 104, and turning that into 1450 and 9. That would be a very, very reasonable expectation for Jaylen Waddle. I also have both of them getting some production in the run game as well, given how creative this scheme is. So that would make both these guys viable wide receiver ones. Tyreek a top 5 potential pick. Waddle more so, mid round 2, late round 2. But still, even though he's a number 2 on his own team, a worthy number 1 for your fantasy team. And then after that, as you can see, and this is true with how they projected things last year, nobody else last year saw more than 9% target share behind these guys. Trent Sherfield was next up with 8.4% target share last year. So I just kind of tossed around, 8, 6, 2. The only one, and you'll see 10% target share here. Who's getting that? Well, that's Devon Achane. And this is the running game, which again could get shaken up. But as a receiver, I do expect Devon Achane, whether we have Dalvin Cook join or not. They've talked early OTAs how he's been a monster underneath and benefiting from the speed around him, that he's just getting such open grass. And once he catches it, how quickly he turns out. He's small. He definitely plays real tough and strong in college. We'll see if that does translate to the NFL level. I love the player, though. I think, despite being tiny, I thought he ran so hard and so great vision. He's a great receiver as well. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if he kind of becomes the de facto number 3. No more Gesicki here, who again 8.5% target share last year was nothing, but they have nothing at tight end. We can just kind of completely skip that. You look 200. I have Darren Smythe, 26 catches, whatever. We don't need to worry about that. So I do think a lot of that Gesicki volume, which wasn't much, but I think a lot of that's going to funnel into that running back position with 440 yards for receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns for Achane, in addition to 462 and 3. That makes him the most interesting running back here by far, considering I have right around 1,000 total yards, 7 touchdowns, and 44 catches. That makes him the most interesting. We know how speed obsessed Mike McDaniels is, how he likes to get his guys the ball in space and let them do their thing. I think Achane is the perfect weapon there. Other than that, Wilson and Mostert, they averaged around 10 points per game last year, a near even split throughout the season. So I have them just going 5, 67, and 5. I think Wilson could be the goal line hammer, but they still love to just throw it when they get in close. Mostert might break a long touchdown or 2, but I don't know that either of these guys are that exciting right now anyways. And then if you mix in the risk that Dalvin Cook could get added, we get even trickier there. But as you can see here, wrapping up with Tua, just all that volume going to Tyreek Hill, and Jaylen Waddle should mean good things. He finished last year 25 touchdowns, nearly 4K yards, and missed 5 games. So this is projecting a fully healthy season. That's one part. And I know that's probably what the bone you'll pick with me, Truth, here. When I project these, I do typically try to factor in just what happens if they play a full season. And that is a big risk.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But it's so tough to be like, all right, he's going to play 11 games, and we'll give 4 games to Skylar Thompson. This is just kind of the rosy picture. Like if Tua does play and he's got a new concussion-based helmet and he's beefed up a little bit, I have a little more faith that he makes it through. But yeah, of course, we've seen him take some horrible hits, and no one would be shocked if he takes a huge hit at the beginning of the year and is done. So that's the risk with all these weapons here. They do operate pretty good. I think Mike White does lessen that risk as well as the backup quarterback. Yeah, we've seen him get it done with the Jets plenty. So I think even Tyreek Hill, Waddle, they'll be fine if Mike White is ultimately inserted. But I think too, this is what I could see. Nearly 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns or so if he stays healthy. With these weapons and in this offense, especially in year 2, I really think that's very possible as well. So yeah, there's my long-winded Dolphins and all the players you need to know. What's some what bones you have to pick, or anybody you want me to dive into a little more?
I mean, you already called me on what was going to be my obvious one, but I think that you have to project it the way that you're projecting it. I don't, you can't, I think the guy's probably going to get hurt, and I hope I'm wrong, but you can't predict when that will happen or how severe it will be. You can't be like, yes, I mean, it's not a crystal ball thing. If you were going to be like, I'm going to project him for 7 games because I think he's going to get hurt in week 8 or something like that. Well, I mean, it's just as likely to happen any week. So you have to project, you have to make your predictions based on the fact, okay, this is assuming this guy can play all these games.
Right.
And then you have to take that with a grain of salt and decide what's your risk reward, because there's way more risk with someone like him than really just about anybody else. So you have to factor that in, and you have to decide how valuable that upside is. I think it's interesting talking about the backs. It's interesting. I really like Mostert and I really like Wilson, but they're both so unsexy right now. They're solid. They're solid. I'm not hating on them, but they're solid. They're 10-point a game guys. Decent guy to have on your team. Pretty reliable. And yeah, as far as Hill and Waddle, I think your predictions are actually, man, I could see Hill scoring more than 11 touchdowns. I know he had less than that last year. And I actually think your bump for Waddle, assuming health for Tua and stuff, is appropriate.
Awesome. I'm glad you like that. Yeah, this is one thing I love about Mike McDaniels too. Like Wilson and Mostert, they're fine players, but he recognizes I have 2 sports cars in Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, and he just peppers them. I don't know why more coordinators don't just get the ball into their best hand, the hands of their best players more often. I love that McDaniels does that, and it makes them very easy to project, in my opinion. So with that jump from Tua, like that, I predicted it kind of like Tyreek Hill stays mostly the same and adds some touchdowns, and Waddle picks up the slack. But as we were saying, maybe Waddle stays the same and is right around 1,100 yards, and Tyreek just goes for 2K. That totally could be an option here for sure. But that's just what I love, like how clear it's going to be. The ball is going to go to Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle on about 60% of the plays, and then we'll see what else kind of happens behind them. With Devon Achane being the only running back as of right now, I really am targeting. And Campanelli, I know you said he's in the audience. He's probably shitting all over me. Jeff Wilson, you have his body pillow. Like I've been on the record. I love Jeff Wilson. I've always been a big fan. And when he got traded to Miami, he was looking like the next stud there. He had 18 and 22 points the first year. He was looking really good, but then Mostert came back and they started nibbling at each other. And Dalvin Cook's lingering and rumored to be interested here. So I'm just avoiding the backfield. Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle, and I do like Tua shares too. I do have some Tua, especially if I get one of those 2 early as well.
I will close the Dolphins thing by saying it always makes me a little bit it gets me excited initially, but then it makes me pretty nervous when somebody's making a prediction. I'm going to get 2,000 yards this year. I'm going to do so and so. I mean, for some reason, I have it burned into my memory. I feel like one year Warren Sapp just declared that he was going to break the sack record, and then I feel like he got 3 sacks or something.
Yeah, it just was complete trash.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes you look at that and you're like, ooh, man, he's really going to whip it out this year and do it. And then sometimes you're just like, man, don't do that. Just go play.
Yeah, to me, Hill's the type of guy that, I'm okay with him doing it. And McDaniels is the type of coach that I could see, especially if Hill starts fast, be like, yeah, we're going to go get you this record. Let's go, boys. And I'm sure you've seen that picture. It's Mike McDaniels coaches he's the kid that got left at the house by his parents for the weekend because he just is so loose and just lets it rip. He's a player-friendly guy. I definitely take it with a grain of salt in 99% of circumstances, but in this case, I love that he's shooting for the record, and I could see his coach just feeding right into that narrative and peppering him.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, he's fun to watch either way, so I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, let's go into the Patriots. These teams are less interesting, the ones coming up, but they're still kind of interesting. Patriots, obviously, you know, their position in the NFL has changed greatly over the past say, like 5 years or so. And they find themselves now. I mean, this division we talked about this before. This division was just a joke for like a decade, maybe more. And it was just because it was the Patriots and then just these crap ass teams. Maybe every now and then one of them would go like 8-8 or 9-7 and make the playoffs or something like that. Now the Patriots find themselves in a real uphill battle in this division, you know, still coached by Belichick, you know, still with some expectations attached to him. But, you know, they're going to have to fight to not finish last in this division.
Yeah. Seriously, with Rodgers now on the Jets and them no longer a laughingstock, absolutely. I very much look forward to this decision as just a division as a football fan, but as a Patriots fan, yeah, it sucks. You used to be the bully and just that you were going to the playoffs every single year. It didn't matter. I definitely think at least 3 teams are coming out of this division as the wild cards after the Bills potentially. We'll talk about that later, how we see it fill out, because I actually am really excited about this Patriots team. I haven't been, since the Patricia offense era, Joe Judge, like all that hideousness. That's gone. And let's start there with the team level. What I expect with Bill O'Brien now here at offense coordinator, I think it's going to be a big turnaround. Anytime he's been with a team, whether it was at Penn State, then it was with, the Pats for a little while, then it was with the Texans. Like, it's always been a good offense. He's always, regardless of how he rubs you and if he manages his players the right way, he has always called one of the top 15 offenses when he was the play caller at the NFL level. And then he went to Alabama, worked with Mac himself for a while. So I like Bill O'Brien. I think this is definitely going to bring some stability. The early OTA praise is all about how Mac has definitely seemed way more comfortable. He's hitting nearly all of his throws. Him and Bill O'Brien are kind of laughing and looking excited together, and he's holding them accountable in the right way, not like the Matt Patricia dickhead way. So I'm really into this Bill O'Brien, Mac Jones marriage returning to the Patriots and seeing what B.O.B. does here. And so his last time out there with the Texans in an NFL game was in 2020, and his offenses over those last few years typically above league average in terms of pace and amount of plays, 35 and 61 more plays than league average. The last game out, though, 2020, he was actually minus 128 behind league average. So I did mix it in, and I do think you're looking at his historical trends, the fact he's typically at least 30 or more over. I balanced that out and said 29 total more plays than average, 1077, being that with 576 pass, 501 rush. He is typically pretty balanced. You'd think like Deshaun Watson, nearly leading the league in passing. He must have been much more pass happy, but that was just a lot of efficiency from Deshaun Watson. It was typically a close to 55-45 type of split. And that's what I have here. I think this team will lean on their defense, lean on the run game to bleed some clock, and then take a lot of intermediate to deep passing play action with Tyquan Thornton and Devontae Parker and who knows, maybe DeAndre Hopkins. So obviously that would really shake up these projections. As of now, he hasn't signed, but there's a lot of good vibes going on there. So we're projecting him right now without it. Of course, as the summer goes, we update projections and we'll talk about how some of those things have changed as the news falls. But this is without Hopkins being projected in right now. So as a whole, though, I do expect a much more competent, consistent, regimented offense here under Bill O'Brien with a near, 43-47% split. That feels right for a Patriots team under Bill Belichick. They typically have actually been 56% and, a little bit more pass happy the last couple of years. I think they rein that in and really ride Rhamondre Stevenson and then the play action game from there. So I think we do start with Rhamondre Stevenson here. He's definitely the first guy going. Let's talk about the backfield in general. For the Patriots, definitely the most interesting fantasy product because behind him, there's interesting pieces late, but then there's some overpriced pieces, and it really just comes down to should you draft Rhamondre Stevenson or not for the New England Patriots. So I right now project him for 53% of the backfield carries, 266 would out of that pie. It's a healthy ground pie. That's a lot of carries. And I just wanted to kind of show you guys like this. A lot of people are projecting for 280, 300. There's no one behind him. And I mean, 266 is bolder than you might realize because you look here for Patriots running back ones. Back in 2015, LeGarrette Blount had a 299 carry season. Other than that, we had one 261 carry year in 2019. But as you can see here, and that was the Cam Newton year where like everybody was just running. 210, 202, 137, 209, and 180 for their running back one in those years. And right around, I have him at 53% market share. That's kind of right where we see A lot of it's below that. And I do think that this is a much clearer situation. Rhamondre is a clear leg up over Pierre Strong, and the next guy is up. So I do think 53 to 56, definitely worthwhile here. But the fact that some people be like 266, that's way too low for Rhamondre. Look at who he's playing with. You look at their history, and it's not great. You always hear about the Patriots committees at running backs and all that. So I just wanted to kind of point that out when we're talking about Rhamondre. If you think that looks light, well, his history wouldn't be on your side. Another thing, 8 touchdowns. That seems really light for Rhamondre. He's a bull, right? You look at it, he hasn't scored more than 6 touchdowns in a season yet. And this was one concerning trend I saw for Bill O'Brien running backs. The most a Bill O'Brien running back has ever scored in terms of touchdowns as the lead guy is just 6. Which is kind of crazy to me. 6'3".
You're kind of going out on a limb with the 8.
So 8 is, more than any running back has ever scored under Bill O'Brien. Rhamondre is probably a better player than any. You look at Lamar Miller and some of those guys. They just were bums that he had at running back. So you can never just force him. But Bill O'Brien does get a little cute, a little pass happy when he gets in there. That's why Deshaun Watson had so many touchdowns because of how often his coach liked to call it up. So that's where I see him shaking out. And as you can see, I actually really like Pierre Strong now that James Robinson has been released. He's the next man up. And he was averaging 10 yards a touch last year, very minimal touches, but he looked really, really good whenever it was used. It's kind of the rookie thing. The Patriots will always let them earn a year first and then get in there. I wouldn't be surprised at all. They do like to split carries. I do think over 500 team carries is going to be a lot available. So I think over 100 carries, I have him at 115, 540, averaging that 4.7 yards a pop. He was very explosive in college, great in the zone game. One of the top graded zone runners at PFF ever. So I really like this Pierre Strong kid. He can catch, but I do have Montgomery. I shouldn't have moved away from Rhamondre yet because where I do see a big downtick for him, he had 89 targets last year. I just don't see that with Ty Montgomery healthy. I know a lot of you are rolling your eyes. Ty Montgomery.
I'm rolling my eyes.
That's who you're worried about, Ty Montgomery. I agree with you. We shouldn't have to be worried about Ty Montgomery. I would not like to worry about Ty Montgomery, but early spring practices, Ivan Fears, the running back coach, can't overstate how much he's so happy to have Ty Montgomery back and Belichick welcoming him back. And remember, he was the one playing the third down role. He only lasted one game last year, caught a receiving touchdown, was the main third down back, had 6 targets in his only game there. And that's when Rhamondre took off, is once he was hurt. So I do think they're going to kind of, in games without Damien Harris, they would work on, whoever else they could as the receiving back. And Rhamondre would see his touchdowns go up a little bit, but his receptions come down. So I think as good as Rhamondre can be in the receiving game, they're going to scale that role back for as long as Montgomery's healthy. And even if he gets hurt, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Pierre Strong picks up some of that work. So that was a big cut for Rhamondre, 256 and just 1 receiving touchdown after having over 400 yards last year. And you can, again, if they don't cut that, if he sees another 80 targets and hauls in another 65 plus balls, Rhamondre is going to blow this projection out of the water. I already have projected him pretty favorably, but the way he's getting drafted at like the end of round 2, ahead of Derrick Henry and some of these drafts, you're going to need him to sustain that receiving work in order to pay that off. And I just personally am a little more worried about these backs. As just a Patriots fan, as someone who's seen it time and time again. You shouldn't have to worry about Ty Montgomery, but you probably have to. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize that point as well when breaking down the backfield. At the receiving, how does this all get distributed? I do think Mac Jones, we can start with him. I think he's going to have his best year yet. He's never broken 4,000 yards. I think 4,100, 4,200, something like that. And he's never crossed over 28 touchdowns, his rookie year. I think he can break that this year with Bill O'Brien, a more stable offense, better time, deep shots. I'm a big fan of Mac bouncing back this year. I don't know that it will necessarily matter fantasy-wise. I just think real life-wise, this will be a much more competent offense. But 4,100 yards and 30-ish touchdowns without any leg points, that's not something you really need to go out of your way to draft. He'll probably finish as like a quarterback 25 and be okay. Maybe have 2 or 3 big blow-ups on the year, but it's not somebody I'm going after. Now, if DeAndre Hopkins arrives, of course, we adjust for one of the best receivers in the game coming here. But until he does, this is how I have things shaking out target share-wise. 18% going to Juju, manning that slot. I don't think Juju's all that good anymore, but the slot role has been incredible for the Patriots. Another time to kind of slim down here and just show you wide receiver 1, which has been the slot receiver, Jacoby Myers, Julian Edelman, Wes Welker for so many years. And you can just kind of see, if you look at New England, 30%, 20%, 26%, 26%, 23, 24, 22% target shares for their slot guys. So at 18%, I'm under projecting Juju Smith-Schuster right now based on the history of the Patriots slot receivers. But I still think 100 targets right there, pretty reasonable. And you can see what Juju, that's kind of what 101, 28 got hurt, but then 147, he's had target hog years in the past. So 109, not a target hog, but serviceable. He can score touchdowns. He's a physical guy. He's good after the catch. So this is a baseline, a nice floor. I wouldn't be shocked if Juju beat this and scored, 7 to 8 touchdowns instead, and maybe even approach 1,000 yards, given how valuable that slot role has been for the Pats. Again, it's Bill O'Brien coming back, though. I wonder if that's the same type of offense. To me, I think the outside guys are going to get some more timely deep shots and some good work there, which will make them unpredictable. But I actually really like these guys at their prices. Tyquan Thornton is going, about the last 4 rounds or so of drafts. And he's a pretty good pick. He's a great athlete, the fastest receiver to come out in the last 5 years. Showed some real glimpses, bulked up, and was one of the highlight stars. But we see that often. The highlight stars of OTAs, when there's no pads on, are often the speedsters. It makes sense. He did struggle with physicality. He's small. He's thin. So we'll see if he can beat presses. He had some size to hopefully do that. I think Devontae Parker, though, largely undrafted. I think he's going very, very overlooked right now. I think they project quite similarly. In fact, I have Parker outscoring Tyquan Thornton right now, but he doesn't get drafted at all. He's one of my favorite last-round picks. His last game out, he scored 2 touchdowns. He had multiple 100-yard days. He only played about 10 full games, and about a third of those were really, really useful fantasy games. So at least in best ball, as a last-round stab, a guy's going to pop up for a couple touchdowns here or there. I really like Parker in this offense. I think the biggest impact, though, is going to come at tight end. As you can see, I have Gesicki coming in for 8 touchdowns. I love Gesicki. I think he's been very underutilized by Miami these last couple of years. He was the most heavily targeted guy by Mac Jones in these early practices. And again, it's no pads, it's OTAs. I get it. I'm not trying to overreact, but just to know he is seamlessly fitting in so well. They were saying you don't be surprised if Gesicki and Hunter Henry are the top 2 target guys based on how often they were used. So I have him going at 15% target share, the second highest on the team with 86 targets. And I think it makes Gesicki, the only reason I don't absolutely love him is Hunter Henry's a good player too. And it's similar to Kincaid and Knox. It could be a situation where they're constantly nibbling at each other. But I think Gesicki's the clear-cut better pass catcher. He wasn't in line at all, and nor should he. He's not a good blocker. So I think he's the more big body kind of slot, split him out, get him going wide. I think Bill O'Brien, he recruited him at Penn State too. They have a history together. I like Mike Gesicki quite a bit. So 8 touchdowns may be lofty, but he is a touchdown scorer. You think about how many hideous gritties you had to see last year from the Gesicki celebration. So I really like Gesicki. I think he's one of the better late-round tight ends you can make an investment in. I just think this offense overall gets a lot more stable. Rhamondre being, again, the focal point and pretty solid, but that cut in receptions maybe making him a little less valuable. And then from there, the receivers are just going to be so spread out that rather than take Juju in round 9, 10, go for Parker in their last rounds, and go for Gesicki in the last rounds type of situation.
Yeah, I'm not very bullish on the Patriots passing game. I mean, I'm still not convinced that Mac Jones is great. Definitely not good. I'm not sure. We'll see. I do really love Rhamondre. I mean, I think it's weird. People are saying, 266 carries, like that's low. It's like, no, to me, that's hot. That's legitimate bell cow work. That's 17, 18 carries a game. And if you, for some perspective, like I know we're talking about projections here, but for Cook and Damien Harris, I mean, they combine for about what you're projecting Rhamondre is going to get as far as carries. I mean, that's a legitimate workhorse guy. That's where's he going right now in snake drafts?
He's going like late second, early third at the latest.
I love him. Early third, I love him. Yeah.
Absolutely. I do too. So who would you like more? He goes sometimes around Derrick Henry. You probably go Henry, right? The king.
Maybe just on reputation. I mean, I love Henry. He's really fun to own, so I'd probably go Henry. But I wouldn't say a Rhamondre pick would be crazy.
Yeah. No, he often does. And then like Jacobs versus Rhamondre, I'm starting to lean Jacob. I mean, lean Rhamondre myself.
I would lean Rhamondre.
Yeah. I mean, if he does get the receiving work, I do obviously put him down for a little bit less than what we saw last year. But if he somehow does maintain that and they just decide, as they probably should, let's just make this guy a 350 touch guy this year. I mean, he's a beast. I saw him firsthand. I went to a Cleveland game where Harris was out, and Rhamondre went for like 170 and 3 touchdowns on the ground. I love the player. Don't get me wrong. Like, me projecting him for less is not me thinking he should get less. I think he should get more. I just am worried Montgomery is, as disgusting as that is to say, I'm worried Montgomery's going to end up catching just around similar amount of balls. And that goes from going to 65 catches to like 40. And that does take its toll, given a lot of his work a lot of his points came from the receiving game.
Yeah, I hear you. No, I like him a lot. I hear him. I hear you. Let's finish this thing off with the New York Jets and their 2023 fantasy projections. We saw some strides out of the Jets last year. And I mean, obviously any analysis you're going to do of them last year is going to be with Wilson and without Wilson. There's also some other with or without things that were going on. Obviously, Breece Hall looked like a world beater until he was gone. So that's kind of a what if. And of course, I mean, we brought in, and there's so many question marks here. We bring in Aaron Rodgers, and there's so many question marks about Aaron Rodgers.
You not lead off with that one. I mean, Breece Hall was great, but Aaron Rodgers is arrived.
The reason I didn't lead off with that is because I feel like when you're talking about the Jets 2023, you have to talk about their 2022 because we got a lot of we got some data points to look at. Like we learned that their quarterback was terrible, just awful. We learned that they had something in this running back, and now we're bringing in a quarterback where, I mean, his range as far as where he could perform this year is probably about as wide of a range as any quarterback in the NFL, at least that comes to mind. Like if you told me that this guy was going to be a top 3 quarterback in the league, I could be like, okay, I believe that. He's Aaron Rodgers. If you told me he was going to suck ass, I'd be like, yeah, of course.
It's Aaron Rodgers.
This has been coming for a little while now. So anyway, dive into these guys.
Yeah, let's look at it. So it is going to be all new here, but we do actually have some interesting data to dive into. The fact that Rodgers is reuniting with Nathaniel Hackett, we had 3 years of these guys together. So I'm going to be projecting a lot based on that. If you look at the 2022
Nathaniel Hackett, the worst coach in the NFL last year?
Yes, exactly.
Just making sure we were talking about the same guy.
The biggest dumbass in the NFL, 100%. Okay. Yes. For whatever reason, he got hired to be their offensive coordinator. I loved LaFleur, the guy that they moved out. Where Rodgers comes from, it's actually his younger brother, Mike LaFleur. He went to the Rams. I think they got a huge get by getting his mind there. I think LaFleur was not the issue at all. It certainly was a Zach Wilson issue, but hey, they replaced him with Hackett, the biggest bonehead in the league. So let's see how that will shake out. When he played with Rodgers, though, these two actually did coexist quite well. We'll see if that can remain the way here. Because you look at their 22, and you just look at the Jets in general, since Robert Saleh got there, they've been a mostly pass-happy team, 60%, 61, and 56% of the time, which you wouldn't think for a defensive-minded guy that would be the case. But you actually look at whenever Zach Wilson was not in the game, they averaged the most pass attempts and most pass yards in the league in those games across their last 2 years. So they love to throw the rock. It just was they would never throw it when Zach Wilson was there. So on that sense, you might think Aaron Rodgers is going to get heavily used and let's air it out and let's roll. They're going to do it with Flacco, and they're going to do that with Mike White. Why wouldn't you do it with Aaron Rodgers? But you also look at Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers together. Maybe it was the LaFleur influence. Maybe it was Hackett. I don't know. But they were typically right around, you look at it, 57% pass, 43% run, 54%, 46%, 56, 42. So it's always kind of balanced attacks. They were always under the league average in plays run, kind of bleed the clock, take their time. It was never like a high-powered, let's let it rip with Hackett and Aaron Rodgers. It was always a methodical, good, solid offense that didn't end up lighting up the scoreboards, but they just won a lot of games because they really could control things. So that's kind of what I projected here is 59-41. So balancing that Jets run, pass happy ways with Hackett and Rodgers' history here to get, a little bit below league average, minus 29. That's right around what we've seen there. So less total plays, but more likely some very efficient plays. Now, how will this all get distributed in this kind of meh overall pie? So starting with the pass catchers, this is going to be an easy one. And we saw this with Rodgers and Hackett's offense for 3 straight seasons with the Packers. And I think this Jets team is very similarly built to those Packers in that they're going to have an alpha, and then there's going to be very little else that you're really going to want to pay attention to. And I think that's going to be Garrett Wilson. I have him right now projected for 28% target share, which is not very many receivers break that 22%, never mind 28. But we saw Rodgers' number 1 receivers under Nathaniel Hackett. And yeah, it was Devontae Adams. I get that. So it's not just like this is automatically how they'll operate. But his average target share was 29.9% target share there. And even if you don't look at them and you go back to Jordy Nelson, you go back to Randall Cobb, his number 1 receiver has always averaged around 27.6% target share. So I thought 28% is honestly pretty fair, especially given that Rodgers is already comparing Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson, saying I played with the number 17 that he reminds me of before. So I think 169 targets, 113 catches, and then he turns that into 1,424 yards and 11 touchdowns. I don't think that's actually as nearly as bold as some of you guys might think there. And a lot of you guys probably don't think it's bold. You're like, yeah, I get that. So even if you look at the averages for his wide receiver ones, whether you take Cobb, Nelson, Devontae Adams, Rodgers number one have averaged 102 catches, 1,215 yards, and 12 touchdowns. So this is right in line with their averages. This is me saying I think Garrett Wilson's better than what Randall Cobb used to be back in the day, and he's going to help balance that out. I really like this kid. So I love him. And then as you can see, after him, 73 for Lazard, 60 for Hardman, 50. None of these guys matter. Lazard's getting drafted way too early, in my opinion. I know he got recruited by Rodgers, but even in his year being Rodgers' number one, I can kind of show you real quick. Lazard's really done nothing in his career. He's a good blocker. He's a reliable guy, but fantasy-wise, his career high is 100 targets when he was the number one guy, 60, 46, and 52 otherwise. So 73 is breaking his historical trends. And that's while he's competing with Hardman. If Corey Davis stays, I don't love Corey Davis, but he's not any worse than Allen Lazard. So to me, Allen Lazard's the only one getting drafted right now. That makes no sense to me because the other guys aren't really getting drafted. It's the Garrett Wilson show. The only other pass catcher, except Breece Hall, which we'll make sure to cover. I've got a lot of points on him I want to talk about, and they're all good. Tyler Conklin, though, we haven't really seen a tight end thrive with Rodgers in a long, long time. They're typically around 10% or so target share guys. Conklin's been a 15% target share guy in back-to-back years. I think I put him in for 13%, which would be a little higher than what Rodgers typically targets tight ends, but also a little bit lower than what he's averaged these last few years, Tyler Conklin. And he was another one of those guys, with or without Zach Wilson. He goes from averaging 6 points per game to averaging 9.5 points per game. At tight end, that is a significant jump up. 9.5 points would have put him right at the tight end 13, 14 range. And so it makes him at least a little bit more viable as a last round punt tight end in your underdog drafts. Could see him spiking a little bit more than what we've been accustomed to, just because he was pretty solid without Zach Wilson in those games. So 578, 5 touchdowns for him. Again, the rest of those guys mattering very little. But I did say I wanted to talk about Breece Hall. And if there's one thing that Nathaniel Hackett does well, it's involved his running backs in the passing game. I had some stats here over his last decade of calling plays here for Nathaniel Hackett. His teams have never, in 10 total years, never finished fewer than the top 10 in running back targets and target share other than one time. They've always finished with at least 103 total running back targets, and his top running back has had 63 or more targets in 7 of 9 years. Last year was one of those few years it didn't work out, but Javonte Williams got hurt. He was on pace for 89 targets last year. And I think Breece Hall as a receiver is better than anybody that Nathaniel Hackett's ever worked with. He is an insane receiver. That was one of his big calling cards coming out, was how good of a 3-down back he really is. So maybe he sacrifices a little bit of carry volume because it is usually a committee. You think of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon and Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. It's how he likes to operate his backfields. But the guy that's catching the passes is always going to have value here. So I have a nice 79 targets going to Breece Hall this year. And again, if he pierces 100, it wouldn't shock me. But around 60 catches on that, 413 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns to go with 1,000 yards and 7 TDs on the ground. That's a really solid season for Breece Hall, who's going late round 3 right now. It does assume that he's healthy and ready to start the year, which most reports say he will. This kid was a phenom last year, though. He only made it through a few games, but he was a running back one in over half of his games and only seemed to be picking up steam as the year went. So with more passing game work coming his way, and that's the natural skill set, I really like Breece Hall. Behind him, it's just going to be, I like this kid they drafted, Israel Nkanda. Michael Carter's had some flashes. I liked Zonovan Knight last year. So I think it's just going to be like a bunch of pretty good guys that just nibble at each other and don't matter outside of Breece Hall. And even if Breece Hall gets hurt, I think you're looking at a 2 to 3 headed committee that might get ugly. But yeah, Rodgers ultimately with all that comes out at 4,252 yards and 31 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. That would be more than, it might seem like a low amount for Aaron Rodgers. But if you look here,
seems high to me.
And honestly, that's kind of right where he's been. You pull it up here. So, that's running back one, not quarterback one. So you look at Aaron Rodgers here, and he hasn't thrown for that many yards. He's done that once in his last 5 years. So It seems a little low, I guess, for the reigning MVP. The fact that he threw 48 touchdowns a few years ago, maybe there's some more meat on the bone. Touchdowns wise with 31 versus 48, but I just don't like Nathaniel Hackett. I like these projections are pretty rosy. It wouldn't shock me at all if the Hackett just continues to combust. Rodgers is fed up. He's getting chewed out by the media, and this thing just combusts, and they are just horrible, and nobody performs well. Garrett Wilson runs one route the wrong way and gets frozen out. I don't think that happens, but I did want to just emphasize that floor does exist. There's a pretty big range of outcomes here for these Jets. So just keep that in mind, too, as you're drafting. There's really only Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, and honestly, at their respective prices, like I typically you got to go Garrett Wilson or Devontae Adams. I'm just going to go Devontae Adams, who has a better track record. You typically go Breece versus Rhamondre Stevenson sometimes. I'll go Rhamondre Stevenson in that case. So, yeah, I as much as I kind of like these guys, and I love those young two talents, I haven't ended up with a ton of them in early drafts right now.
I feel exactly the same way. And I said at the outset when we started talking about the Jets, I felt that Rodgers had about the widest range of possible outcomes for any quarterback in the league. It's possible there's somebody I'm not thinking of, but I mean, yeah, you can marry that to the Jets as a whole, and I mean, a lot of that will. I mean, God, there's so many question marks about everything, about everybody, from coaching to quarterback to running back to receiver. It's like you could see a real path to success, but man, I can see a rosy path to failure as well. So,
very much so.
That's about it. Yeah, so before we take off, let's do our predictions. What's the order of these teams in the AFC East?
You want to kick off, or you want me to go first?
I'll kick off.
All right, let's hear what you got. I'll see if I agree.
I'm going. I feel, Bills number one.
Yeah.
Hot take. I'm gonna go the order that we presented the teams today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to go Bills, Dolphins, Patriots, Jets.
I think I'm right with you. I do think the Pats and Dolphins might end up tied record-wise, like 10-7.
Yeah,
both of them end up like really close like that. It comes down to a tiebreaker, in which case the Dolphins have owned us in the last few years, so maybe that's the case. But yeah, I think all three of the first teams make the playoffs. I do think the Jets with Rodgers could be more competitive too, and
they could.
Maybe they sneak in. All four teams from this division come in. Can that even be possible? It can only be two wild card teams.
I think it's possible.
Yeah.
I think it's possible. They've now that there's three wild card teams now. So.
Although the AFC is so you look at like
the
Ravens.
That will happen. I understand why you're positing that as there's some real upside to all these teams. It's one of the only divisions you could say that about. Where there's all this, but I just have I just want you to think about last year when Russell Wilson went to the Broncos, and everybody was like, you watch the Broncos, and I was just like, nope, the Broncos are going to finish last in that division. You watch, and the Broncos were absolute dog shit, and now we've got a quarterback going to the Jets, a big name quarterback, and everyone's like, oh, they're going to turn all this around. Oh, and guess what? Hey, Nathaniel Hackett's going to be here too.
The same guy, right?
Yeah,
Get ready to take him.
Remember the guy that burst everybody's bubble last year when everyone was all high on Denver? Well, guess what? He's going to be calling plays here. So hey, no, thank you. I'm out.
Yeah, I'm going 13-4 Bills, 10-7, 10-7 Dolphins, Pats, 8-9 Jets. That's where
wouldn't it be so funny if the Jets were just terrible?
I mean, they have the biggest. If anybody just tanked in this division, it'd probably be them.
Rodgers is just like sulking and blah, blah,
sulky,
blah, kind of blaming other people and other factors. I'd love it if they went 4-13 or something.
Me too. Awesome. Well, why don't we hit that mailbag? That thumbs up if you enjoyed so far. I would really appreciate that thumbs up button. If you're not here live and want your questions answered, just comment them. I'm always checking the YouTube to answer any questions that come in after shows as well. And we only got a couple of questions.
Not really much in the way of mailbag. Jeremiah just checking in, saying, "What's up, y'all? What's up, buddy?" Campanelli, I'm back to bad duty, but she needs to learn now. I'm assuming
she needs to learn. Breed the wolves young. Yes, Campanelli.
He already called me out for mushing.
Yeah, Gabe Davis has been mushed by the truth already. Oh, man. Well, yeah, I guess we got no questions there, so we can wrap this up. All our content, again, is at rotostreetjournal.com. All these projections will be available in past years. What I've done, and I like how I'm doing it this year, I kind of just had a psycho 2 days, and I'd bang all the projections out, and then we do this, and I could look at like where they all shook out at the end of my projections. I kind of like just doing a division a day. I can really zoom in and laser in on the stats even that much more. And then afterwards, me and you can do a show truth where we look at like, whoa, okay, we put all of them together now. Who are some surprising situations here that came out of the projections? Let's compare them to the rankings. We can do a whole follow-up show once all the projections are fully aggregated and together. I kind of like doing them piecemeal right now, though. So I can't tell you Rhamondre is now my running back 10 based on projections. We'll be able to do that after all these are wrapped up.
We'll get there. It's
nice to kind of do it. It will be surprise. It's like a nice little surprise almost if you do it that way.
Love a good surprise.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, if you enjoyed that, we'll be live at 12:30. Is that okay with you tomorrow? You think? I know your schedule has got a little more up in the air.
We'll check in every day. I mean, as of right now, yes, I'm good for the week. In the summer, there are always the possibilities that something's going to pop up, but I will make sure that we're on the same page. And so I'm anticipating recording every day this week.
Awesome. So 12:30 tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday. Friday will be a little earlier. The Wolf will be off to his bachelor party, and might be the last you ever see of me, but we'll figure that out. We'll do like an early morning show before I leave, and it might be the last time I've ever returned. So who knows? But yeah, so we'll plan on that, and then next week as well, 12:30 every day. So sweet. Come on back if you enjoyed the show. These will be launched in July as well for purchase. If you want to support your boys, that does go such a long way as well. A lot of time and effort get poured into these. And hopefully they are as accurate as can be. They were mostly accurate last year, where, as you said, Allen Robinson, Gabe Davis had some oversights. But for the most part, these projections tend to be pretty solid. So I think you guys would get your money's worth, and you help your boys out. It'd be so appreciated. So cheers. You can find all the rankings, everything at rotostreetjournal.com. Me at rotostreetwolf on Twitter. I'll be live if you want to come back later tonight. I'm going on the Dynasty show as well. Anybody else out there? Our Dynasty Dive show with Dane and Emery's going live tonight. They've done a couple episodes so far. I'll be reviewing a big trade. I just traded for Darren Waller and Daniel Jones in our league truth. I kind of sold the farm. So we'll see how that stack comes out for me. But we've been raving about both those guys all offseason. I got a little horny, and I went after them. So if you guys want to hear some Dynasty stack talk, all that good stuff, come on back at 6 p.m. tonight. Otherwise, tomorrow 12:30, Wolf guys. Later.